Throwaway, BC, my husband's family loves Reddit, and I can't risk this getting back to them. So I, female, 31, feel like I'm losing my mind over what happened with my father-in-law yesterday, and I honestly don't know if I went too far or if everyone else is crazy. My husband, male, 34, thinks I'm wrong, but also admits his dad was being awful, so I'm just confused. Am I the idiot for recording everything my father-in-law says when he visits? Okay, so some background, and I know this is going to sound insane, but I swear I'm not making any of this up. My father-in-law started doing these regular Sunday dinner visits about 6 months ago. He basically calls my husband every Thursday and asks what we're having for dinner that weekend, and my husband just automatically invites him over, like clockwork. The visits themselves are fine when my husband is around. His dad shows up early, helps himself to beer from our fridge, and plants himself in the living room watching TV. But here's where it gets weird. The second my husband steps away, like to take a work call or use the bathroom or go get something from the garage, his dad turns into a completely different person. He'll start making these really nasty comments about my cooking, my housekeeping, basically everything about me. But it's not just normal criticism, it's mean, like unnecessarily cruel stuff. For example, last month when my husband stepped onto the patio to take a call, his dad criticized my seasoning and said the house smelled bad. Then he told me I should learn to cook properly. But the second my husband came back inside, this man is suddenly talking about how great everything smells and how lucky his son is. I tried telling my husband about it, and honestly, this is where I started feeling like I was going insane. Because his dad completely denied saying any of it, said I misunderstood his sense of humor, and that he was just trying to help. My husband talked to him about it, but then his dad acted all confused and hurt that I would think he meant anything mean. This pattern kept happening. His dad would trash my housekeeping. Apparently, I don't dust enough. Criticize how I organize our kitchen cabinets, tell me I wasn't taking proper care of his son's home. But then my husband would come back, and suddenly, I'm the most patient daughter-in-law ever. My husband started getting frustrated with me about it. He kept saying his dad was just old-fashioned, and I was being too sensitive. He reminded me that his dad helped pay for our wedding and that I should show more respect. I started feeling like maybe I really was overreacting or mishearing things. But then a Sunday about a month ago happened, and I knew I wasn't crazy anymore. My husband went upstairs to use the bathroom, and his dad spent literally 20 minutes just tearing me apart. He opened our kitchen cabinets and criticized how I organize everything, pointed out dust on the coffee table, told me I wasn't wife material like women from his generation. The worst part was when he said I'd never be good enough for this family, no matter how hard I try. Then my husband comes back downstairs, and this man immediately switches to telling my husband how patient and dedicated I am, just completely lying to me and making me feel crazy in real time. So I did something I'm not proud of. My mom always told me that when people don't believe you, you need to record everything. I started keeping my phone recording whenever his dad visited. I know it sounds sketchy, but I felt like I was going insane and needed proof. Over the past 3 weeks since then, I caught multiple recordings of him calling me uptight, saying my husband could do way better if he'd stop settling, and telling me I'd never be good enough for this family. I had actual evidence of everything I'd been trying to tell my husband. Yesterday, during dinner, his dad was doing his usual routine while my husband was taking a work call in the garage, making his nasty comments, the whole thing. But my husband finished his call earlier than expected and came back toward the kitchen just as I pulled up one of the recordings on my phone. I played it, and my husband heard his father's voice clearly saying, I was never good enough for this family. His dad went absolutely ballistic, started screaming about me spying on him and violating his privacy in his son's home. Said he couldn't trust me anymore and stormed out, saying he won't be back until I apologize for betraying him. Now my husband is, I don't even know. He finally believes me about what his dad has been saying, but he's also really upset about the secret recording. He keeps asking how many recordings I have and saying he feels like he doesn't know who to trust anymore. His brother texted me this morning saying he heard what happened and that he wasn't surprised because their dad has always been manipulative. Apparently he tried to warn my husband about this years ago, but my husband defended their dad and it caused problems between them. So now my husband is dealing with realizing his brother was right all along, too. I feel like I'm in the middle of this family mess that I never wanted to be part of. But also, Was I wrong to record him? I mean, I felt like it was the only way to prove what was really happening since no one believed me. But my husband says it was sneaky and violated his father's trust, which, like, what trust? The man was being horrible to me. I don't know if I should apologize to keep the peace, or if I was justified in recording the abuse. Am I the idiot for recording my father-in-law without his knowledge? Edit 1. Since people are asking, yes, my husband and I had our numbers swapped with his dad about 6 months ago when he mentioned not driving at night anymore and needing emergency contacts. His dad actually insisted on programming his number into my phone himself, which seemed weird at the time, but I figured he was just being practical. Edit 2. To those asking if this is a pattern with other family members, I honestly don't know. We don't see his extended family much, and when we do, it's always big group settings where he seems normal. His brother mentioned their dad being manipulative, but didn't give specifics. I'm starting to wonder if there's more to this than I realized. Edit 3. For everyone saying I should have talked to my husband first before recording, I did try talking to him multiple times over months. He literally told me I was being too sensitive and that his dad would never say things like that. I felt like I was going crazy, and the recording was the only way to prove I wasn't making it up. Maybe it wasn't the perfect solution, but I was desperate for someone to believe me. Now for the first update. Update. Found out the real reason my father-in-law hates me, and it's not what anyone thinks. Well, you all called it about the manipulation, but none of us saw this coming. I'm still processing this and honestly don't know what to think. So remember how my father-in-law, let's call him Frank, stormed out Sunday after I played that recording? Well, yesterday evening, right after she ran into him, my sister-in-law Sarah called me completely confused. This came just as Tom and I were starting to talk through the recording incident, but he was still going back and forth between believing me and defending his family. And I can't even explain how blindsided I am right now. Apparently Sarah ran into Frank at the grocery store yesterday afternoon, and he was all chatty and excited, which already seemed weird since he supposedly hates me now. He starts telling her how he's so excited to finally move into the guest room next month. And Sarah's like, "Oh, that's nice. Which guest room?" Thinking he meant at my brother-in-law's place or something. And this man just casually goes, "At my son's house, of course. It'll be so nice to finally have a proper home again." Sarah said she just stood there like an idiot holding her groceries because, what? She assumed I knew about this arrangement and was maybe just stressed about the transition or whatever. But when she mentioned how it must be a big adjustment planning for a live-in father-in-law, I guess my complete confusion was pretty obvious. I told her nobody had mentioned any housing arrangement to me, like at all. She got really quiet and said she'd thought it was weird that Frank seemed so sure about the timeline when I'd never brought it up during our conversations. So I immediately called my husband, I'll call him Tom, at work, and oh my God, you guys, he got so defensive immediately. Like the second I mentioned what Sarah said, he started with, "It's not like that, and you're overreacting again." But when I pressed him, he finally admitted that yes, Frank has been bringing up moving in during their Thursday phone calls for months. Tom claimed it was just casual conversation and not serious planning, but like, the man told my sister-in-law he's moving in next month. That's not casual conversation. I told Tom flat out that I don't want his father living with us. I mean, after months of him calling me not wife material and saying I'll never be good enough. And Tom just lost it. Started saying I was being heartless about family and reminding me again about how Frank helped pay for our wedding, so we owe him consideration. The fight got really heated, and Tom accidentally let slip that he already told Frank it would probably be fine without asking me first. When I asked when this conversation happened, he got all shifty and admitted it was like 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. This man has been wanting to move into my house for 3 weeks, and nobody thought to mention it to me. Then Tom's phone starts ringing. It's Frank, and he apparently overheard raised voices when Tom answered, which, how convenient. Tom puts it on speaker. Why, I have no idea. And Frank immediately starts this guilt trip about being rejected and how I'm tearing the family apart. He actually called me heartless on speakerphone in my own kitchen. I was so angry I could barely think straight, and I demanded Tom tell me the full truth about Frank's situation. And guys, this is where it gets really messed up. Frank has been staying temporarily with different family members for the past 2 years. His retirement income apparently isn't covering rent anywhere decent, Tom's words. So he's just been rotating between relatives' guest rooms this whole time. And then I started thinking about all those comments about my housekeeping, the dust on the coffee table, how I organized the kitchen cabinets. He wasn't just being mean. He was checking out my housekeeping. When he said I wasn't taking proper care of my son's home, he meant where he wanted to live. When he criticized my cooking and cleaning, he was seeing if I'd take good enough care of him. The whole time I thought he just hated me, but really he wanted to live here. I feel so stupid for not seeing it, but also like, how was I supposed to guess that? When I suggested looking into senior housing options, Frank started crying on speakerphone. Started talking about how I was going to make him homeless and he'd end up in some awful place because I was being cruel. Tom immediately sided with him and said I was being heartless to an old man who needs help. And I lost it. I said this man has spent months telling me I'm not good enough for this family, and now I'm supposed to happily let him move into my guest room. Like, the audacity. Frank went into full whining mode and said he'd pack his things from my brother-in-law's house and figure something out without saying where. Then he hung up after going on about how he wouldn't be a burden anymore. Now Tom and I are barely speaking, and I honestly don't know if I'm being unreasonable or if this is just more manipulation. I mean, I feel guilty about an elderly person being homeless, but also, this man has been emotionally abusing me for months while secretly wanting to move into my house, and my husband was in on it. I keep going back and forth between feeling like a terrible person and feeling like I'm being manipulated again. Tom keeps saying his dad just needs help, but there has to be other options besides him moving into our guest room after months of treating me like garbage, right? I don't even know what I'm asking for here. I guess, am I crazy for not wanting him to live with us? Is it really that heartless to say no to this? Edit. 1. Since people are asking, no, we don't have kids yet, and yes, the guest room is pretty big with its own bathroom. I think that's part of why Frank wanted our house specifically. 2. To everyone saying I should have been told about this sooner, obviously, I'm honestly more angry about that than anything else. My husband making housing decisions for our home without consulting me feels like a huge violation. 3. For those asking about the brother-in-law's situation, apparently Frank has been staying there for 8 months straight, not just visiting like Tom told me. Yes, I still have all the recordings from before, and no, I haven't deleted them. After this housing thing, I'm wondering what else I don't know about. 5. To the person asking if Frank has anywhere else to go, honestly, I don't know, and I'm trying not to let guilt override my boundaries. But it's really hard when everyone's acting like I'm the villain here. Now for the second update. Welcome back, everyone. Things have gone completely off the rails since my last post, and honestly, I don't even know where to start. You were right about the manipulation, but none of us saw how deep this actually goes. So yesterday morning, I'm sitting in my kitchen trying to process everything when my phone starts ringing at like 7:30 a.m. It's my brother-in-law, Tom's brother, I'll call him Jake, and he sounds completely panicked, like out of breath, panicked. First thing he asks is if we're really letting Dad move in with us. I was confused why he sounded so freaked out about his father leaving. Shouldn't he be relieved if Frank's been such a burden? That's when Jake confirms what I suspected about Frank living with them for 8 months straight, but then tells me something crazy. Frank made them promise not to tell anyone because he was embarrassed about his situation and didn't want extended family thinking he was homeless. But really, Frank just didn't want anyone else to know he'd been mooching off one family for that long. And here's where it gets really messed up. Jake explains that this isn't Frank's first time doing this. Apparently, Frank has a pattern. He moves in with a family member, acts grateful for like a month, then slowly starts criticizing everything. When he gets bored or wants a change of scenery, he'll deliberately pick fights with whoever's wife until she demands he leave. Then he uses that rejection to guilt trip the next family member into taking him in. Jake says Frank has been doing this rotation for 2 years. Started with their uncle for 6 months until he wore out his welcome, Jake's words. Then moved to their cousin's place until he caused problems there too. The whole time telling everyone he was just temporarily staying different places. I immediately called Tom at work, and when I told him what Jake said, he got quiet for a long time. Then he just sighs and says he suspected something like that. I pressed him on why he never mentioned it before, and he admitted he'd been in denial, hoping that his dad's issues with other relatives were just misunderstandings, especially since Dad helped with our wedding. Suspected. His brother is telling me their dad is basically a professional manipulator, and Tom suspected but didn't think to mention it. Tom finally admits he hoped this time would be different and that Frank would settle down with us. He also mentions, like it's no big deal, that there's some $15,000 debt situation between Frank and Jake that's been making things complicated. Which, what? Since when do we know about family debt issues? But wait, it gets worse. Jake tells me that Frank has been telling different lies to each family member about why he needs help. Like he'll complain to their aunt about Jake being greedy while telling Jake that the aunt was unsympathetic. He's been starting fights between family for years by playing relatives against each other at gatherings. And suddenly I understood. All those months of Frank being cruel to me, that wasn't just him being mean. He was trying to make me so miserable that when Tom had to choose between family and his wife's comfort, he'd pick family. Frank was creating a crisis to force Tom's hand. The recording incidents, the housekeeping criticism, telling me I'd never be good enough. He was trying to show dominance before moving in, making sure I knew my place. I was feeling sick at this point and decided to call their mother, my mother-in-law, to get the real truth about Frank's situation. But Jake literally stops me before I can dial and tells me something else crazy. Their parents have been secretly separated for 2 years. Their mother has been living in a senior community this whole time, while Frank bounces between relatives. They're hiding the separation because they're embarrassed. Generational shame thing, I guess. But Frank has been using this secret to manipulate housing situations with their kids. Jake explains that Frank threatens to expose the separation if family doesn't help him, and their mother has been telling extended family she's just taking time at a retirement community for her health. The whole thing is built on lies and manipulation. Despite all this family mess, Frank's 70th birthday dinner was still happening that weekend because it had been planned for weeks and nobody wanted to cancel with extended family involved. So Saturday night, we're all sitting in this restaurant pretending everything's fine while knowing about the manipulation and separation. Frank's acting like the star accepting birthday wishes while secretly being desperate for housing. The dinner was awkward, but we were managing to keep up appearances until Frank asked Tom to step aside for a private conversation. Except he positioned this conversation right near my table where I could clearly hear every word. And then he loudly says that marrying me was the biggest mistake of his life. Other family members overhear and look shocked. Frank's final manipulation attempt to publicly humiliate me and force Tom to choose sides in front of everyone. But here's the thing. 3 days earlier, Wednesday night after our housing argument, Frank had gotten drunk and left me this desperate voicemail. He called my number instead of his wife's because apparently he was afraid of her judgment, which makes sense now knowing about the separation. In this message, he's literally begging me for $800 and admitting he's been stretching the truth about his financial situation. So when Frank made his public declaration about me being the biggest mistake, I just smiled calmly, excused myself to the bathroom, and forwarded that entire desperate voicemail to his wife's phone number. Added a little note saying she should hear this. I came back to dinner, and we finished the evening like nothing happened. The next morning, Jake calls me saying their mother got my forwarded message last night and is demanding an immediate divorce. Apparently, she realized her husband has been begging for money from his daughter-in-law while telling her he was doing fine and doesn't need help. She understood that he's been manipulating their kids with lies about being independent this whole time. She called a lawyer first thing Monday morning. But it doesn't stop there. The mother-in-law shared the voicemail with the uncle and cousin, showing the extended family how Frank had been manipulating everyone. Everyone realized they've been manipulated for years and all agreed to stop enabling his actions. Now Frank is frantically calling everyone in the family, but nobody will take him in after learning the truth. His entire manipulation network collapsed in one day. Tom is devastated that his family is falling apart, but he finally sees his father's manipulation clearly. He's getting calls from upset family members and realizing how much his father lied. Frank destroyed relationships for personal gain, and Tom finally understands. I was right about everything, but the family damage is already done. And honestly, I feel both vindicated and guilty as hell. My revenge worked too well. Family relationships are destroyed beyond repair. Frank is facing homelessness and divorce. Tom is devastated about the family destruction. And I'm questioning whether exposing the truth was worth the total family implosion. I mean, Frank brought this on himself with years of manipulation and lies. But I was the one who exposed everything and caused it all to fall apart. I keep going back and forth between feeling like I did the right thing and feeling like maybe I went too far. Tom barely talks to me now, not because he's angry exactly, but because he's grieving his entire family falling apart, and I think he associates me with that pain even though he knows his father caused it. I don't know what I'm even asking for here. I guess, did I do the right thing? Or did I just destroy a family because I was angry about being manipulated? Since so many are asking about the $15,000 debt Jake mentioned, apparently Frank borrowed that money from Jake last year for medical expenses, but Jake found out he used it for a vacation and gambling. That's part of why Jake's wife was getting fed up with him living there, because Frank owed them money while eating their food and criticizing her parenting. For everyone wondering what's happening with Frank now, according to Jake, he's been calling around desperately trying to find somewhere to stay, but word has gotten out to the whole extended family. Last, anyone heard he was looking into some kind of weekly motel situation, but I don't know if that's actually true or just another manipulation attempt to make everyone feel guilty.